Welcome to the Bold Book of the Day with Dr. Denise Nicholson, a show that is a central hub and safe space for authors to share their stories. The Bold Book with Dr. Denise begins now.
Hello, welcome to Bold Book of the Day. My name is Dr. Denise Nicholson, and this podcast is for anyone looking for inspiration. Today, I'm so excited to welcome Roger Chiocchi to the show. Roger is not only an accomplished author, but he also has a seasoned executive with over 25 years of experience on Madison Avenue. Okay. And so on Madison Avenue, he served as senior vice president and and a young and Rubicon, and later as president of the subsidiary, the Lord Group. He's worked
Yes,
on
indeed.
iconic campaigns for brands like Advil, AT&T, Verizon, USAA, and Kraft Foods. Please welcome Mr. Roger Chiocchi to our show.
Thank you so much. I'm very glad to be here, Denise.
I'm glad you're here too. You have such an extensive experience, and all of a sudden, I'm here in front of you, and I can't believe this because you, you're not just a baby boomer, right?
Well, I am a baby boomer by description. I don't like to advertise that, but okay.
But you've
um,
had a
but
long and successful career in advertising on Madison Avenue, working with the biggest brands in the
yeah.
world. And now you have the experience of writing a book. How did that experience shape you as a professional and as a writer?
Well, I went into advertising. I got my MBA at Wharton after undergraduate, and I always wanted to be in something to do with the media. And back then, advertising agencies were a very good way to start. And I was what was called a suit. Okay, I was one of the account guys. I wasn't a creative person, but I had always had an inner desire to write. Going back to high school, I used to write short stories, long stories, and as I matured at the advertising agency, I really wanted to be more of a creative person. But you spend 2 years getting an MBA, and who wants to take a salary? Yeah, if they would have taken me, they might have. I would have taken a salary cut. So I decided to write on my own. So I had an apartment not far from Young and Rubicam, and I would from 11 o'clock at night till 1 in the morning, I would write. I was always intrigued by ghost stories. And so the first book I wrote way back in the late 80s, early 90s was called Mean Spirits. And it was a ghost story. And I spent, I think, about 18 Saturdays in that New York City Public Library, with the two big lions out front.
Hmm.
And I read everything I could on parapsychology because if I was going to write a ghost story, I wanted to write um, as realistic as you can for something that may or may not exist. but I learned a lot, and thankfully I had never seen a ghost because I don't know what would happen. But no, so it was a good story. It was about a fictional family that their paternal, they came over on the Mayflower, and they were subject to a curse from a woman that was with them on the Mayflower that came back every other generation. So it was interesting, but that's how I started writing. And I was sort of like shy about it. I wouldn't tell the creative people that I was writing a book. But then that one actually, when I published it, it rose to number one of ghost stories on Amazon right at
Oh,
Halloween time that year. And number two was Stephen King, my hero.
oh,
So I felt good
wow.
about that. Okay, so and
That's
then I went
impressive.
on to write. Then I went on to write other things. Um, I wrote a nonfiction book about the economic meltdown in 2008 and how it affects, guess who? Baby boomers. and then I wrote a book called Time Framed, which is a sort of an extension of Mean Spirits into the future. And then I began writing the Brushy Ridge Militia, and I did it for a reason. These school shootings have always really bothered me, right? As they bother everyone.
Most
You
people.
just you just ask after Columbine, way back in the 1990s, how could young kids who were disturbed get access to a gun? And then, fast forward, Sandy Hook. I live a half hour from Sandy Hook. Tragedy.
Yeah.
And that happened on, I think, December 14th, 2012, right before Christmas. And my daughter and I, on Christmas Day, went to Sandy Hook. And you couldn't get to the school. It was blocked off, but there was a makeshift memorial down in the middle of the town. And we left some, store-bought flowers there. And then, we had Marjorie Stoneman Douglas in, I believe it was the mid-20 teens. And something really struck me during that. There was a few days after the tragedy, there was a big community meeting. There were thousands of people there. The senators were there, Marco Rubio, the mayors, the Congress people, and even the NRA had a representative there. But what struck me the most during the Q&A session, a history teacher from the high school stood up and she asked the panel, how was that man well regulated? How was that shooter well regulated? What militia was he a part of? And it really made me think, because, those 27 words, the Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Those 27 words, if I read them to you out of context, or anyone out of context, what do they mean? Oh, well, there's a militia, there's guns, so I guess you're allowed to use guns to form a militia. So, there's been years and years of Supreme Court interpretations of what those words mean. But think about it. A set of 27 ambiguous words is what controls or oversees gun policy in the United States. So fast forward, I had this idea for a book based upon exactly what that teacher said in that Q&A session. So what happens in this book is there is a devastating school shooting. The parents get the call no one wants to take. For you and me, we're devastated too. But 3 days, the news cycle changes and it's all thoughts and prayers, right? But if you're the parent and it comes from out of nowhere, think of the devastation that causes. And so what happens is these parents lose their children. They go through all the stages of grief, from numbness to anger to finally, I want to use the word acceptance, but acceptance of a much different normal than the previous normal.
Yeah.
And then they lobby Washington. They can't bring their kids back, but maybe they can do something to help other families in the future. Maybe they can lobby for safer gun regulation. Excuse me.
Yeah.
So they arranged some meetings with Congress people and senators, and one of the people, the most important person, is Speaker of the House Fred Graham, who is Fred Grantham, excuse me, who is sort of takes a lot of money from the gun lobby, and he won't meet with them. And they're upset. and they stand outside his door. And when he walks out, they're holding pictures of their kids who passed away in this devastating incident,
Yeah.
and that really ticks them off. And what happens? They get back to the town, Brushy Ridge, Ohio, and they one of the parents is a lawyer. He's a very good constitutional lawyer, and he gets the parents together and he says, "You know what? Um, that set of words that allowed that young boy to get access to a gun doesn't really say that. It says you could have guns to form a militia. So why don't we form a militia and take the Speaker of the House hostage and make him watch video of the shooting and morgue shots of the kids until he learns the devastation that this thrusts upon families, and maybe change his mind and agree to bring legislation to the floor of the House." So that's the story behind the Brushy Ridge Militia. And I think it exposes a lot of ambiguities in our world, particularly starting with those 27 words in the Second Amendment.
Families are the ones that are affected continuously over a longer time, like you said. But what can families and communities do except to form a militia? What can
Well,
families
I
do?
mean,
Advocate but what can you
yeah.
do?
Well, there's a brick wall when you try to just advocate and lobby Congress, because there are a lot of pro-gun people. You know, we just want reasonable gun laws. We're not going to take guns away from
Right.
responsible gun owners. You can't, because the gun ownership is a right that's in the Bill of Rights, and that would take another amendment, I think.
Yeah.
And so these parents, the unthinkable had happened to them. And the only thing they can do to fight it, because of this brick wall, is to do something that's unthinkable.
Yeah.
So this is an act of civil disobedience. It's just like when Rosa Parks sat in the front of that bus.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes something has to give. And they decided that what happened to them warranted them to take a big risk, because they could spend their lifetime in jail afterwards, but they thought it was important enough to do this to make a point.
And that's because, like you said, they face a number of brick walls, so to speak, because there's the brick wall of shock and trauma, which, when there's gun violence, you just feel like nothing is moving forward. Life is not moving forward.
Yeah.
You're just suddenly stopped. But especially those people who have lost children or someone that was killed in that incident, like a teacher or the janitor.
Yes.
But so those people are stuck in that shock and trauma, so to speak, a brick wall. But then there's also that brick wall of grief for them and loss for those who've lost
Yep.
loved ones. That wall represents the unbearable pain, and blocks them from moving forward and having joy, sometimes for a long time, for even having joy with other children in the same home. You just can't
Yes.
find any joy. So that's another brick wall. The anxiety and fear that family members or students who are survivors have felt, that's another brick wall. So there is just so much to unpack when we talk about that. But your book provides the family with some kind of um, radical movement that, despite what people around them think, they think it's necessary for their survival to remember their children by, or for them to just get past that brick wall?
Well, when you think about the history of America, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's based upon civil disobedience. Sam Adams and his cronies one day went onto a ship and threw tea into the Boston Harbor. That was civil disobedience. Rosa
Mm-hmm.
Parks was civil disobedience. Martin Luther King was civil disobedience. And if those events didn't happen, I think our lives today would be much different.
Is it
And
civil disobedience? All is it still considered civil disobedience when you form a militia and bear arms?
well, that's part of the crux of the book because
Uh-huh.
eventually, I mean, they do come up with this really sophisticated plan to take the speaker hostage, and obviously, they're eventually apprehended by the FBI, and they have a trial, and they lose at the trial, but ultimately it goes to the Supreme Court. And
Mm-hmm.
the Supreme Court then is forced to rule on this set of words that
Mm-hmm.
has been misinterpreted over many years, or reinterpreted, to be more precise, over
Mm-hmm.
many years. And so they have to rule on it. And one of the Supreme Court justices is what we call an originalist. Okay, an originalist believes that the only way to interpret the Constitution and the Bill of Rights is by what those words meant to the
Originally.
average person on the street.
Ah.
Okay, and even if so, this guy was a diehard originalist, and that was his whole shtick. And so he had to rule on what those words actually meant at the time they were written. And so that puts him sort of between a rock and a hard place,
Mm-hmm.
um, because he's normally conservative, normally, pro gun lobby, but now they're asking him, basically the parents are saying, put up or shut up.
Yes.
You're an originalist. What do those words mean?
Yes.
And I'm not going to tell you what happens beyond that, but
You
uh,
gotta get the book, guys. Roger, you have described yourself as a perpetual student, and I can hear it in our conversation that you love learning. You're always learning about stuff. And as a matter of fact, quantum mechanics is one of your specialty. How does this
well, it's not.
curiosity?
No, it's not my it's not my specialty. I
Okay.
could understand. I watch a lot of YouTube videos on physics and
So you
quantum
know more about it
mechanics.
than the regular person on the street.
Probably, but I could never do the math. so, um,
How about
so
astrophysics?
well, yeah. I mean, I follow Neil deGrasse Tyson a lot. I watch
Mhm.
his podcast, and no, but learning to me is one of the most stimulating things I can do, or the generic you can do.
Yes, yeah.
There's so much around us that we take for granted, and we have this whole universe out there, which is much different than what just there's no gravity, right? Or
Yeah.
there's hypergravity, depending upon where you are. There's black holes out there, which no one really knows what's down at the singularity. So I love reading about that stuff. And my last book, Time Framed, which was the continuation of Mean Spirits, we was really based upon science fiction. It was a blend of science fiction and paranormal. So yeah, I love learning, and the nice thing, yeah, learning for learning's sake is great. But when you can do something with it and take what you learn and sort of craft it into a story, that is very satisfying.
And I
But
believe
then you
you.
got to go ahead and then you got to go ahead and market the book, which is not as much fun, even
It's a
though
lot
my
of work.
background is in that game.
That's
Yes,
that's a lot of work. But
yes.
you have crafted a message that is so relevant. And it seemed to be, even though we have come a long way since Columbine, it's still relevant today because we just had Sandy Hook. I mean, these
Well, and
terrible shootings happen all the time. As a matter of fact, Sandy Hook was about how many years ago, you said?
it was
Um,
2012. So, but it seems
20,
like yesterday.
yeah,
And
but then
Marjorie,
more recently, there was another one, um,
well,
a
there were two.
devastating one.
There was one at Park Avenue. The fellow was he had CTE from high school from
Uh-huh.
football, and he wanted to go after the NFL, but he ended
Hmm.
up killing three people in the lobby. And I think he got a gun from a family member. I may be wrong, but
Hmm.
if the family member knew there was something wrong with this guy, why give him the gun?
Yeah.
And then last week in Atlanta at the CDC, an officer was killed by someone who was he was actually I think diagnosed as schizophrenic. You know, when you get into discussions with people who are very pro-gun,
Hmm.
they say it's not the gun that killed somebody, it's the person, which is only half true. A gun by
Right.
itself can't kill
Cannot
anyone,
kill anyone. Right.
and a person without a gun, unless they have a knife, can't kill anyone. But when you put that gun in the wrong person's hands, that's what kills someone. So it's the combination of the gun and the person. And, so more reasonable gun legislation would say you have to have a background check. There can't be the private seller or gun show loophole where you don't even have to. All you got to do is prove you're above 18 or 21, depending upon what state you're in.
Yeah.
And, so there are some common sense regulations, which I don't think would compromise reasonable gun owners or responsible gun owners from, enjoying what they enjoy about their guns. But it's a brick wall. I think they think if they give up an inch, they'll end up giving up a mile. And I think that's part of the problem.
No matter how we slice it, gun violence, it just leaves a reverber, reverberating effect.
Reverberate.
I'm eating my own words. Yeah, but it just leaves that effect that it's long lasting psychologically. It tears family apart in every way. So yeah, we got to do
Yes.
something about it. But I like that your book talked about the families coming together and saying, we're gonna be radicals, we're gonna do something about it. And despite what the outcome is, they knew that they had to make a difference. And sometimes you have to stand up when no one else is standing up for you, right?
Sure. As I said earlier, the unthinkable happened to them. They lost their kids just like that. They drop them off to school one day,
Oh,
end of the day, they're in the morgue.
yeah.
They have to do something unthinkable. It's like they're in a situation like, suppose you lost your job and you have a family of three kids, and you can't afford to buy groceries. Well, I can tell you what I would do. I'd steal groceries for my kids. I think most people would say that. So you have to sometimes understand that we have a set of rules, but sometimes the rules have to be broken. And that's what happens with these parents. Um, they are normal, respectable people. I told you one's a lawyer, one's a veteran, one's a football coach, one's a receptionist at a doctor's office, another one works at the
Yeah.
local public utility. So it's a
Everyday
cross section.
people. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a cross section of America. It's a typical suburban town in Northeast Ohio. It's a fictional town, but so you're seeing it. What happens? One of the things that the book gets great reviews for is that you're looking at this tragedy from several different perspectives, from someone who's affluent, someone who's not, someone who has PTSD, um, and so that sort of creates a aura around the grief, I guess, which is sort of a weird combination of words, but yeah, so they decide they love their kids so much that they're willing to put their lives on the line.
Now, what do you want the typical reader to walk away as a call to action?
Well, first of all, um, let's get more reasonable gun laws,
Mm-hmm.
which is there's still a big brick wall in the way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, Understanding the power of civil disobedience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, one of the lines in the book when the lawyer, his name's Hank Patrick, is trying to convince the other people they should form a militia. Um, he says he mentioned Sam Adams throwing the tea into the Boston Harbor, and they go. One of the people in the room say, "But that's history," and he goes, "It wasn't history until it became history."
That's right.
So they didn't know. They didn't know they were making history. They were throwing boxes of tea into the Boston Harbor. So there is um, a legacy, I guess, for lack of a better term, of civil disobedience throughout the history of the United States, and we were created based upon civil disobedience. We told the king to go pound salt,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, understand that there is, when it all comes down to is the first three words of the Constitution are "we the people." And sometimes I think our legislators from both sides of the aisle don't understand the power of the people or
Yes.
create roadblocks, unnecessary roadblocks because of stupid reasons that the will of the people does not always get expressed. And when that happens, when something so important can't be done, I mean, there is the option of civil disobedience. January 6th, as flawed as it was an act of civil disobedience.
Yes.
Of course, that was based upon an untrue premise, but okay. Um, so, yeah, again, it's a double-edged sword because some people might exercise civil disobedience in defense of a bad idea. But in this case, the parents' motives are moral. Um, they feel that they've been um, excluded from the conversation because the Speaker of the House, the only person who can allow legislation to get to the floor of the House, won't even talk with them.
Wow.
So they have no
We
choice.
experience that even, I mean, I realize that you have taken what's politically and socially going on in this climate and written a book that is grounded, even though it seems like it's a story about the Brushy Ridge Militia. It's really what's
Yeah.
going on in our political climate. So thank you so much for being brave enough. One of the things I notice with authors, we are afraid to take a side. We're afraid to have, many authors are afraid to have the discussions that are necessary based on the climate of our community or what's going on politically. And I feel like this is you taken aside. So kudos and thank you so much for that.
Well, yeah, I'm taking the side of the people. I'm
That's
not
right.
being one side of the aisle or the other, although I do lean towards
The
them. But
people.
yeah, but yeah, I mean, we have a divided Congress that can't agree on anything. And we have a lot of things that you could just, from, like Gallup polls and things that people want, but they won't do it.
Yeah.
More than 60% of the people, according to polls, want more reasonable gun laws.
Yes.
But it's not going to, but we have a logjam because of politics and because of money in politics, quite frankly. If your
Yeah.
money is coming from people that don't want you to do anything with gun laws, then
It's not happening.
it's not happening. That's the way to put it. Thank you.
Hmm.
Um,
So for aspiring authors, um, how can they change our reader's mind and get them to move, knowing the consequences of taking a side?
well, I don't. I mean, authors take sides. I think more than you think.
Okay.
But you have to tell a good story. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
writing is about storytelling, and you have to think it through. Um, what you know, it's not about what the message is, the broader message. It's about telling a good story, and hopefully that message comes through. And hopefully it does in this case. I'm hoping it. I mean, we're still building up sales. Actually, we ran a free promotion earlier this week and we were #1 in contemporary American fiction. So we were happy about that for a couple of days at least. And no, and another thing about writing is authenticity is so important. The shooting scene is in the book, and it has to be no holds barred when you write it. You can't be. Um, you have to be authentic. It has to believe. It has to feel like it really happened. And it's not when you're writing. It's not about logic. It's about emotions. And you have to
Yes.
connect. And just in advertising too, you have to connect on an emotional level.
Emotional
And
level.
in
Yeah.
storytelling, yeah, and on storytelling and book writing, it's exponentially more important. So it is uh, important, and so young aspiring writers, all I can say to them is write and write and write again, and don't write because you think you're going to make $1 million. Very, very few authors do. Write because
Yes.
you love telling stories. And
Yes.
you know what? If you write for that reason and you have the passion, um, you'll get there. You'll get there.
Thank you so much. Where can they find your book?
On Amazon, the Brushy Ridge Militia. It's out in ebook and in paperback, and it's at a lot of other outlets too. It's at Barnes and Noble. But if you Google the Brushy Ridge Militia, you'll find a bunch of places. But I think the biggest retailer is Amazon.
Yes. Okay. Do you have a personal website where they can get that book if they wanted a signed copy?
BrushyRidgeMilitia.com. The title of the book without the word "the" in front.
Okay.
And that's where they can go and they can message me if they'd like a signed copy.
All right. Thank you so much. Now, before you go, this has been really, a wonderful conversation because people don't want to talk about these things. And so I appreciate you writing an entire story, an entire book. And it seems like something that I need to read myself. So please, I will go out and get mine and add it to my reading list. Oh my goodness, I'm adding to my reading list. for this year. So I'll try to get it done before December. But I am
That's good.
intrigued. So certainly I'm looking forward to reading The Brushy Ridge Militia. So before you go, I would like to, you know, ask some questions because that's what I do. I'd like to dig
Okay.
into, I'd like to dig into the minds of the authors that come here. So what's a bold promise that you can share with the audience?
Well, that individuals can make a difference if they
Mhm.
have the chutzpah, I guess, in lack of a better term, to try to make a difference. A lot of us, you know, a lot of people, and for good reason, accept things blindly. Oh, there's nothing we can do about that. Congress will
Mhm.
never do that. They'll never change that rule. But yeah, all it takes is one impassioned voice to start a movement. And if you can start a movement, you can get traction.
I love that because sometimes we
Thank
feel
you.
that one person is not enough, but we are enough if you're passionate enough.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's passion that, I mean, normally every day, like who wants to be bothered? You have a life to live. But sometimes living life is not enough. Sometimes you are so enraged that you have to do something that might be unthinkable. But
Yes.
again, as I said, civil disobedience was one of the factors that the United States of America is the United States of America.
Absolutely. What is one bold statement that you can share with the audience that will cause a paradigm shift?
It sounds maybe a little mundane, but be true to yourself. Let that inner voice, that inner voice, the voice of your heart and
Hmm.
soul, listen to it. And if you listen to it and take and have the energy
Hmm.
and the effort to take action, you can make a difference. It's sort of redundant with the last question you asked, but um, paradigm shifts. You know, uh, Usually when there's a paradigm shift, particularly in the world of science, at first everybody thinks that the person who's um, putting forth the new idea is a crackpot. People didn't think Einstein, when the theory of relativity came out, a lot of people thought he was a crackpot. But then all of a sudden, over time, it got accepted. So always listen to that inner voice. That's all I can say.
Listen to that inner
Hopefully, one
voice.
voice, not many.
Then we have a different situation.
Yeah, definitely. Um,
So what's in the future for you?
well, I like to write, as you know, and right now I'm working on a screenplay, TBD, and I do that, and I teach. Actually, I teach marketing at a local university, and
Ah,
um, and so that keeps me going.
so you are the one to be marketing this book. You have this tragedy in there.
Well, yeah, but books are a different animal, and less
Hmm.
people read today. More people watch TikTok, I think, than read books. But yeah, there's still a few out there. So we're going to try to get the word out to as many of them as possible, and
Are you
we're
on
working
TikTok?
on it. Um, yeah, but not really.
Okay,
I
you
don't
got to
have
get
enough
on TikTok
followers.
and tell people about your journey as you go about the marketing and creating marketing
Yeah.
strategy. Tell people want to hear people want to be a fly on the wall of our lives. So if you can
Yep.
start to just document the what do you do daily when it comes to marketing this book, then that's what people care about. And then they'll buy your book
Okay.
because they're watching your story. So There's a tip for the marketing.
There you go. Okay. I could always learn. I
Oh,
could
thank
always learn new
you.
things. Um,
I mean, we know you for continuous learning.
okay. Well, that is what keeps, you going. You have to have something to wake up for each day, right?
Absolutely. Is there anything that you'd like to share with the audience before we go?
Oh, just to, give the book a shot. It's
Yeah,
interesting. It's gotten all 5 stars so far on Amazon, so I'm happy about that. And yeah, and more broadly, follow your heart. You know, find whatever you're passionate about, do it. Because unless you believe in reincarnation, you only go around once. Um, so don't muffle your passions.
yes. Thank you so much for joining us, Roger
My pleasure.
Chiocchi.
My pleasure.
This conversation doesn't end here, guys. You got to pick up the book, read the story, and then take take a stand, do something, decide to do something. So I encourage you to check out the book, and then start your organization, start your school safety program, or some way how you can make a difference in your community, because like Roger said, change starts with us, right?
Yeah, but you don't have to go form a militia quite yet. But
Not a militia, but
but because
because there are
hopefully
consequences.
you're never gonna be struck with that devastating news. But
Yeah.
there are things you can do short of taking that type of action. And yes, it's all about us. Remember that.
Yes, and support organizations. Maybe you don't have to start something, but you can support organizations working for safer schools and better gun laws.
Yes, indeed.
So, thank you for listening and for caring and being a part of this community that believes we can do better together, and we can change whatever is going on in our community if we decide to speak up, and we can have hope. No matter what's going on, we can have hope. Thank you for listening, and please go out and grab Roger Chiocchi's book, The Brushy Ridge Militia. Let me not eat this up.
Militia.
Militia, the Brushy Ridge Militia. I think my mouth is dry today. So, yes, please go out and get your copy, and just, see what happens when the community came together to stand up, and see how we can be inspired to stand up. If you'd like to write a book, please reach out to me, author Denise Nicholson, author D Nicholson at gmail.com. And I'll help you get your book idea out of your head and onto paper. We have our publishing company, boldpublishings.com, that you can go to if you need a consultation. Thank you for joining, and thank you for listening. See you later.
Thank you for joining us for the Bold Book of the Day with Dr. Denise Nicholson, a central hub and a safe space for authors to share their stories. Follow Dr. Denise on Facebook and Instagram at Denise Nicholson, or go to denisenicholson.com. Remember, no one can share your story better than you.